Round 5 here at U.S. Nationals. TJ Rogers alongside Jacob Van Loon and Seth Manfield on the right side of the battlefield, facing off against Ben Weinberg. It's mono red versus mono red. The scourge of the format finds its way here to the feature match.
Yeah, here we are, undefeated in the last round of Standard on the day, and a pair of these red decks facing off.
It's Beaumont Courier. We've got ourselves a true mirror match. The only thing missing is matching art.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on this one? We've got full arts on both sides. Do you find yourself going towards the unsets or the Zendikar sets?
I prefer the unsets myself.
Okay. I tend to go a little bit more towards the Zendikar one myself. So, the Beaumont Courier, go ahead. They're just going to keep swinging in right now. 2 ships passing in the night for these early turns while they're still trying to develop their board. It's going to be a Soulscar Mage, though, hitting the battlefield. This is going to be a big card. We talked about this one really several rounds ago, as far back as round 1. Soulscar Mage is enormous in these matchups with indestructible creatures or these larger creatures. This means that right now Seth has actually options to handle a card like Hazoret.
Yeah, Soulscar Mage lets you, actually put -1/-1 counters on the Hazoret so that you can, deal with it even though it's indestructible in your red deck.
Mm-hmm.
Something that's interesting to note here is that Seth has missed his second land drop.
Yes.
And while I spoke about the player who would draw fewer lands would have an advantage, I didn't mean this few, Seth. I didn't mean this few.
Bit too literally there. So we are just going to throw a quick block in front of the Beaumont Courier. We're going to shock it. Now, this is before damage. Remember, the Soulscar Mage is on the battlefield, which means that there are going to be -1/-1 counters. Normally, that Karizev does have first strike, and it would beat the Beaumont Courier. The shock would not finish the job. It's because of that Soulscar Mage that was able to happen.
Yeah, Soulscar Mage, again, doing a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen how strong that extra text is on there.
Chain Whirler coming on down, eliminating that Beaumont Courier, leaving Ben's own, and now it's just a Soulscar Mage on a lonely mountain, trying to hold off this assault.
Yeah, Seth, looks like he still has not drawn another land here.
G2 Lava Runner coming down to the battlefield. This is a 1/2. We only have 1 instant or sorcery in the graveyard. Once that second one enters, it will be a 2/2. But even still, this is a rough spot to be in. That Chain Whirler can attack functionally untouched. The first strike on that one is going to protect it from just about any exchange it runs into, and Seth is tapped out.
Yeah, Ben really able to play out his hand, where Seth, he's used all of his mana every turn. Unfortunately, that has only been 1 mana a turn.
That's true. That's true. That's mana efficiency at its finest.
Yeah.
On Ben's side of the battlefield, 4 mana assembled. I've heard it said by many fantastic players that when it comes to this red deck, that 4th land is really a critical one as far as when the powerful spells start hitting the battlefield.
Yeah, it's it usually marks the turn where you start double spelling or where you cast Hazoret, and those are 2 things that are really scary across the table when you're playing against the red player.
So we've got an on-crop crasher coming down to the battlefield, but I want to touch on something. We've been saying the term double spelling a pretty decent amount, which feels kind of intuitive, but just a quick clarification. What do you mean when it comes down to double spelling and why that matters?
So what I mean by double spelling is casting 2 spells in a single turn. And with a deck that's as tempo oriented as this mono red deck, when you're casting 2 spells in a single turn, each of your spells is either increasing the number of threats you have on the board by 1 or reducing the number of threats on the other side of the table by 1. So when your opponent is only able to do 1 thing a turn and your spells are already cheaper, it just kind of snowballs ahead and you end up having a pretty big advantage.
So we see the exertion from that on-crop crasher. It's floating a little bit off screen, but you can see that text box. We did also see that Soulscar Mage come down to the battlefield. Like you said, that's the 2nd spell of the turn, and it's really going to help, right now, Seth not really putting down those cards that were a big issue, but it's more pressure on the battlefield. Now it's 3 creatures that are swinging in. So Seth has got 2 of these G2 Lava Runners. They are 1/2s. He's also got this Soulscar Mage, also a 1/2. Coming in is a 3/3 with first strike, and it looks like we're going to put 2 blockers onto this Soulscar Mage, looking to take it down. Wizard's Lightning comes down, and that's enough for Seth to pick it up. Wizard's Lightning on both sides of the battlefield. We were talking about how Seth is on one of the more aggressive versions. Is Ben sort of mirroring him in that same sense? I mean, we see Wizard's Lightning, we see that G2 Lava Runner.
Yeah, I think they're both playing the same deck, and this deck is not an unknown quantity, even though it is, a different version of red than we're used to seeing. A number of people went undefeated in Magic Online leagues over the last week and a half, playing versions of the red deck that are playing Get To Lava Runner and Wizard's Lightning. So Seth and Ben have definitely been doing their research. They've definitely been playing on Magic Online, and they've recognized this to be the version of the red deck that they wanted to bring this weekend. And it seems to have been a good choice, because here, Ben, undefeated, Seth, undefeated, both playing this same red strategy that's also, got this wizard sub-theme, if you will.
They came to the same conclusion, both in the meta and at the end of the round 4. It's a feature match now. So as they're going into the sideboard, aggressive versions, I guess there's really, a couple of ways that you can approach the sideboarding when you're looking at a mirror match, especially with these aggressive decks. There's something, this has been a matchup that's been talked about since really the beginning of Magic, as far as the aggressive mirrors and who's going to take what role. Do you have any thoughts as far as how these decks are maybe going to approach that? Maybe neither of them do, or is this going to be something that happens in the sideboarding process?
So I imagine both players are going to be bringing in a number of reactive cards. I think that with the amount of removal that will be in these decks post-board, in Game 1, both players have 4 copies of Lightning Strike, Shock, and Wizard's Lightning. And when we go to post-boarded games, they're also going to add, 3 to 4 copies of Chandra's Defeat and maybe some number of Abrade. And when both players have that much removal and their threats, besides Hazoret, are all going to be able to be killed by virtually any removal spell, I think this may be one of the ultra-rare sub 1% situations where we see Seth Manfield choose to draw first. So that's something to look out for. It may not happen. I'm not sure if it's even correct, but if it is ever correct in Constructed Magic to draw first, I think this is, one of those situations.
Sure. And, I've heard the people who do sort of advocate for drawing first, very often it comes down to 2 factors, which is, A, the amount of cheap removal that you have, which is definitely something that is being satisfied with. But the other aspect that might play a factor is just the amount of haste that can exist in these decks might be an incentive to go the other direction.
No, and that's definitely true. You also want your opportunity to just win.
Yeah.
And that's something that the red deck has going for it, is that you get a lot of free wins because of how fast your deck is.
I mean, they don't call it red deck wins for nothing. Yeah. Right? So maybe being the first player with 4 mana is another option to explore, because really post-board, they're going to be bringing in some copy of Chandra. They might be bringing in some copy of Rekindling Phoenix if they choose to, or they'll just stay really low to the ground. It'll be curious to see how they approach that.
Yeah, so I imagine they are going to want to bring in those cards, and they're going to want to take out cards that have 1 toughness. For the most part. You don't want your deck to be too weak to Chain Whirler in post-boarded games. In Game 1, the first person to cast Chain Whirler will likely win in a matchup like this very high percentage of the time. In Games 2 and 3, players can cut more of those 1 toughness creatures from their deck. They can bring in more removal spells. They can bring in cards like Chandra, Torture Defiance, or Rekindling Phoenix. So definitely an interesting thing to watch here would be how both players choose to end up sideboarding, and the threat density that these players choose.
Yeah, absolutely, especially when some of those cards they might be looking at, there are plenty of 1 toughness creatures. You mentioned those Bomat Couriers, those Earthshaker Kenras. Anything like that could be a liability against that Goblin Chain Whirler.
Yeah, and Goblin Chain Whirler, even just a 3/3 first striker, is actually pretty reasonable in a matchup like this.
Now, we all know the accomplishments of Seth Manfield. He's been just about on everything except the U.S. national team. A little bit of information about Weinberg. He's actually been quite a regular player on the GP circuit on the SCG Tour. He's been on the Pro Tour a handful of times. He actually top-8'd Grand Prix Philadelphia quite a few years ago, back in 2008, so no stranger to the grind.
Oh, yeah, Ben Weinberg has been around for some time. He's somebody who, has played a lot of Magic and played a lot of Magic well over the years.
It's so interesting because that list of accomplishments is fantastic. And then you compare it to World Champion 2016. 15 Grand Prix top 8s. 4 Pro Tour top 8s. Winning Pro Tour Ixalan.
Yeah, so worth noting, though, is that Seth didn't just, start piling up these accomplishments since the beginning, and it's come over the course of time. Seth was out there in the trenches for probably more than 5 years, not putting up any finishes like that. Maybe like a Grand Prix top 8 or a couple. But it wasn't until the last few years where Seth really started to just explode as a player. I think that when he won the World Championship, everybody realized, oh my goodness, this person is one of the absolute best players in the world.
I actually remember that.
Yeah, before that happened, he was still viewed as somewhat of an underdog.
Do you remember the deck that he won with?
Abzan. Yeah.
I remember watching that one. I remember recognizing him too, because he has been playing quite a few red decks over the years. So I've been keeping an eye on that one since I saw that. That was kind of in the Khans of Tarkir era, back when there was the deck with all of those goblin tokens, and then you would end up putting Become Immense onto some of them. Yeah. There was a deck there that
I like how you remember that format. I just remember Siege Rhinos, man.
It's red cards. I got to be a fan. You're looking out for them. So, yeah, Seth really, I remember watching him win quite a few of those high-profile tournaments and then seeing him really start just crushing the tournaments in these last couple of years.
Yeah, at that World Championship, watching him draft there was really just a treat for me. I was sitting behind him during one of the drafts, and I was so impressed. I thought he was brilliant afterward. So
it's Mountain, Gitu, Lava Runner on Ben's side of the battlefield. He gets to put down the first permanent. We did see Seth take the play in this one. Looks like he's taken into account that he really wants that extra turn to be up 1. And it's going to be the Gitu Lava Runner swinging in, dealing the first damage of the game. Couple of them now on the battlefield. This is a 1-2 that as the game goes on, they actually gain a little bit of value later on, because then they'll become hasty 2-2s for a pretty low cost.
Yeah, they do become more relevant bodies as the game progresses. Chandra's Defeat, you may be surprised to see that used on something like Gitu Lava Runner, but Seth just trying to make sure he's not letting himself get too far behind here. Yeah, we see the Uncrop Crasher come on in. It's going to be 3 damage. It's a 3-2 that eventually could exert itself to also eliminate some of those blockers. And really, we saw him not do a whole lot with his first 2 turns. He ended that with just eliminating it to where it's now 1-1 as far as the creatures go. Seth, a little bit above as far as creature quality goes. Yeah. And I think I see a lightning strike coming from Ben, deciding how he wants to play this one out. And I think he might just be looking to wait, try and be as patient with it as possible. Maybe a better threat comes down. Yeah, he knows that he doesn't need to worry about a pump spell or anything like that. Those cards aren't going to exist in Seth Manfield's deck. So he can wait on that lightning strike and choose to use it differently if something comes up where he might want to. Hazoret the Fervent comes down to the battlefield. This is in the second main. Tried to go into combat. The lightning strike eliminates it, and now Hazoret has hit the battlefield. It cannot block. It cannot attack just yet, but this is going to be a presence on the battlefield. Yeah, and that is going to be swinging for 5 damage a turn. It's indestructible. Unless Ben is able to assemble a Soulscar Mage alongside an inexpensive burn spell, then Seth should be in a pretty decent position to win a race. Yeah, the big question here is, can Seth empty his hand fast enough? He actually has still got quite a few cards in the hand. We see him deploy a Shock to take down that Gitu Lava Runner. Only 1 creature remaining on the board, but Hazoret is still not looking to attack just yet. Yeah, I think that Seth can turn it on if he wants to, I believe, right? Can he discard a card? Does he have 3 in hand right now? I think he's at either 2 or 3, though with one of them being a land, that certainly helps out. So I believe this is going to put him down. It's just a Wizard's Lightning as an open fire. Takes it down, 3 damage for 3 mana. I guess it sounds efficient if you say it that way. Yeah, I mean, he paid 3 mana to deal with a 3 mana threat. It's a fine deal. And then he's swinging for 5. Ben's down to 12, Seth's at 16, and Hazoret is now going. From Ben's side, we didn't see a whole lot of follow-up just yet. Seth pretty happy about that, I have to imagine. He's entering into his turn. He's got the 5th mana available. He could start throwing these cards from hand if they're not relevant, and Ben not hitting that 4th land
which, as you mentioned, 4-drops are big here.
Oh, yeah, and, Ben, I believe his hand is just a pile of Rekindling Phoenix and Chandras.
And we're going to pick it up. Seth takes game 2, a little bit of a mana struggle on that side. Those Rekindling Phoenixes could have had a pretty big impact on the game if, you're 2 of them. He's such an immense ability to both attack and block to fight through that removal. But that 4th mana never came to be. And now we're heading to a game 3.
Yeah, and again, here we are in a post-boarded game. Both games were kind of decided by a bit of mana struggle. This is a mirror match. There is some luck involved in a match like this. It is, not maybe as interactive as some of the other mirrors you might watch, but there is a lot going on here. I think the ability to develop one's board is something that you're going to want to look out for. I think Rekindling Phoenix, if that comes into play, and games go longer, it could be really interesting to watch if and when players choose to spend 2 cards to deal with a card like Rekindling Phoenix.
Yeah, and these players, of course, in the final stretch, they're heading into game 3 of round 5, which means that once they finish this game, they're actually not going to have to play Standard again, or they're not going to be playing Standard again until really 7 rounds from now. They're about to go through 6 rounds of draft, 3 rounds today, starting tomorrow with 3 rounds of draft. So really, this is where they're building up the momentum to head into another format entirely.
Yeah, and both of these players are going to be very comfortable at the drafting table. I've seen Ben hanging out till well after midnight in hotel lobbies drafting amongst Hall of Famers more times than I have fingers on my hands. Seth Manfield's one of the most impressive drafters I've ever seen in my entire life. So in a field like U.S. Nationals, there are going to be a lot of people here who are Standard specialists. They play Standard week in, week out, but I don't think there are as many draft specialists in the room as there are constructed masters. And
something that you were touching on earlier today was the idea that when so much of the testing is done online, there's this aspect of the draft leagues can sometimes set you up in a little bit of a different way as to when you'll be drafting and playing within your own pod.
Yeah, and the draft leagues are still incredible practice.
Fantastic.
I mean, the fact that you get to play more matches may actually make them better practice than, drafting in pod. But the truth is that drafting in pod is different than drafting in a league on Magic Online. So players will need to adjust for that.
And these will be 2 masters at that.
Yes, very much so. They're very familiar with drafting in pod. So something else that's important to note, if you're ever qualified or planning on going to a mixed format tournament, a tournament that has a portion that's booster draft and a portion that's constructed, I think it's wise for players to put as much practice time as possible into the limited portion of that event. The amount you get better at drafting a format increases so drastically from draft to draft, whereas when you're grinding through constructed games, once you learn the ins and outs of your deck, there's really, the amount of time it takes to get to 98% efficiency maybe 50 or 100 matches, whereas with draft efficiency you may start at 20 and then jump these huge leaps every single match you play. So there's a lot more room for improvement in a draft format because so much can happen and it's so wide open.
Yeah, even from a card pool perspective, these players are playing with a deck that's got maybe 30 cards in it across the full 75 as far as different names go. And once you start getting into that draft, you're looking at 270 different card names that might make it into your deck. Now, some of them are very unlikely to get into that one, but as far as just learning them all and becoming familiar with them could absolutely be a big edge. So as we go into this game, it's going to be on the play Ben Weidenberg going with that G2 Lava Runner. We've been seeing them all over the place in this matchup. And let's see if Seth can answer with his own and continue this mirror match. It's not going to be the case. An attack for 1 and a shock instead. Seth doing something a little bit reminiscent of what you were talking about if he chose to be on the draw, holding up this removal, saving the removal, trying to keep answering those smaller threats.
Yeah, when your opponent has a threat and you do not, it's often wise to use your removal spell on their threat before deploying your own threat, because if you simply deploy your own threat, your opponent can use a removal spell and continue to apply pressure. So, understanding the tempo of the game, where you're not just playing a threat that gets killed over and over while you're taking damage, and instead resetting the board, that's an important skill.
So here we're looking to see what, and it's going to be actually Seth taking a stance on the aggressive Earthshaker Kenra attacking on in. It's a 2-1 with no targets for its triggered ability when it enters the battlefield. Target creature's power less than or equal to. Can't block this turn. But no creatures on the battlefield. I suppose it can target itself, but I don't think it was planning on blocking anyway. And it's going to be Chandra's Defeat.
It's a card that is not great in this matchup because of Goblin Chainwhirler. But if Ben is using a card like Chandra's Defeat on Earthshaker Kenra, that would lead one to believe that he does not have a land and a Chainwhirler in hand.
It also becomes a fine mana sink later in the game. Once you have that 6 mana available, you've already deployed maybe your Chandra, maybe you've deployed your Hazoret. Having that ability that for 6 mana you can get this massive 4/4 threat with haste that can also kind of mess with the combat a little bit could be relevant.
Absolutely.
So 4 mana, and Seth, the first player with 4 mana, puts down Rekindling Phoenix. This is one of the big ones, the 4/3 flyer. When it dies, you get an elemental that's just going to bring it back. It takes 2 removal spells just to get it off the board permanently. Everything else is temporary in this deck.
Yeah, and something that I'd like to note here is that Ben, if he had a Shock or a Chandra's Defeat along with something like a Lightning Strike, he definitely would have fired it off there on Seth's end step. So this means that if Seth has the double removal spell to get this Rekindling Phoenix off the table, then he's going to be at a massive advantage here.
How about attacking into each other? Is that something that you would at all want to do? Because then it opens up for both players to kind of eliminate that elemental on the other side. Or, I don't know, patience becomes another option, Maybe wait until you're the one that can really come out on top in that exchange.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're really ahead on cards, I think that it's very good to be trading. But at this point, both players have very even hand sizes, and I think you want to find yourself a way to put yourself in a position to win as opposed to simply trying to find a way to...
It's going to be Soulscar Mage and then Wizard's Lightning.
Stay safe.
Functionally gets to pay 2 mana for that, then a Shock to take down the Elemental, a swing in for 4. That Soulscar Mage reduced the cost of the Wizard's Lightning by 2. Get the 1 mana Lightning Bolt, get the Shock to get rid of the Elemental, and a swing in for 4. Seth does end up having to spend 2 removal spells on it, but he's left with a 1/2 for his trouble. He's also left with the only 4/3 on the battlefield with flying.
Yeah, so, I mean, now he has the Soulscar Mage on the battlefield, which will also be quite strong as a Hazoret if he has to play against one.
And there's that Hazoret, and just like you said, this card's indestructible. But because that Soulscar Mage's ability, it says that if a source you control would be dealing damage to those creatures that they control, it actually does -1/-1 counters instead. Oh, it's just a Hazoret fight, straight up. So that's going to come on down. It's going to swing on in. The Soulscar Mage is joining the party. And this is an absolute onslaught from Seth. Ben is sitting with a Hazoret that just doesn't have a whole lot of options. I think there's more than one card in Ben's hand.
I think you're right, and I don't think he can get down to 1 card on this turn.
This is a swing in for 10, and Ben's at 16. That's going to put us down to 6 with still all 3 of these threats on the battlefield. Do we have a Chandra's Defeat to try and prevent some of this? Yes. Chandra's Defeat pointed at the Rekindling Phoenix, but still, what a hit. That is going to leave that elemental as well that Ben needs to worry about, because when it comes back, it'll have haste.
Yeah, now Ben is going to need to, if he has the option to do so, spend mana on his following turn to get that egg off of the table. Otherwise, it's going to hatch, and then Seth's attacking for 10 again.
It'll be an old friend back on the battlefield. So there's the elemental, and now Ben has got a couple of priorities. Needs to answer the egg, needs to answer the Soulscar Mage, and that's a Chandra's defeat pointing towards the opposing Hazoret. Now this is dealing that damage, but that Soulscar Mage means that it is going to die. This board is brutal for Ben. He needs to answer all of those threats in the course of the next couple of turns, because that's a lot of damage coming across.
And it looks like he has a Soulscar Mage, which is a good start, especially if his hand was clogged up with things like Wizard's Lightning, which it could have been, because it's the one removal spell that he really would not have had an opportunity to cast at this point.
Yeah, once that wizard is on the battlefield, it reduces the cost of those Wizard Lightnings. Normally they do cost 3, but in this case it would actually make them just a single mana spell. So Ben trying to come up with a line as to how to really deal with this. This is the last game of this standard today. He's been undefeated as of yet. He came across Seth Manfield, number 2 ranked player in the world, and he's trying to find a way out. Is that last card? I think that is a Chandra's defeat, the final card. We're going to point that at the Hazoret, but that does mean that the Rekindling Phoenix is able to come back.
Yeah, so Seth now has been down to just 5 here. Every card in his deck is live. Even if it's a land, he has the Kenra in his graveyard.
So what an interesting debate that Ben must have been having about taking down either the Hazoret or the Rekindling Phoenix.
And it's hard. You have blockers for that Hazoret, but the Hazoret also presents inevitability in a way that the Phoenix does not.
So Ben is just untapping with 2 of these, down to 5 life after that Rekindling Phoenix is able to get a swing in. It's another Soulscar Mage. There is not a whole lot that would prevent this from just being lights out. Seth still at 20 life.
Yeah, Ben definitely not killing Seth anytime soon, and Seth has plenty of spells that go to the dome, so you have to like Seth's chances, even if Ben somehow pulls ahead with other things.
And there's the final creature needed. That's going to do it. Seth is going to take down Game 3, eliminating Ben Weinberg, at least in this round. He's still going to be very live as we move into the draft portion, but a big win for Seth in that red mirror in a deck that is extremely similar to his own. Another player that decided to sleeve up this hyper-aggressive version of the red deck.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't even surprise me if they were playing the exact same 60-card main deck.
So, powerful plays from both players there, but we're going to have more Magic for you here in round 5 of Standard right after these messages. Round 5 here at U.S. Nationals. My name's TJ, joined by Jacob Van Lunen. Now, we did just show you one end of the spectrum, the mono red mirror. It was about as fast and furious as it can get. I think with this time, we're gonna slow things down a little bit, take a little bit of a step back, move into the world of maybe some of those blue spells.
Yeah, and here we are with a control mirror.
Yep, Noah Walker on Esper control up against Christopher Meyer on Grixis. And it's going to be a little bit of an interesting one. You know, both of these decks very much trying to move in somewhat of the more controlling route, but one of them a little bit more mid-range cards. The other one, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria.
Yeah, and worth noting, Christopher's deck is not quite Grixis. That's an ambitious Grixis. I believe he has 1 Canyon Slough and then Ether Hubs as red mana. And the only red card in his 75 is a single copy of Nicole Bolas.
Oh, that's in the sideboard, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, Nicol Bolas, the God Pharaoh. So we have got Search for Azcanta on the battlefield all ready for Noah. This has been a card that actually saw a bit of a spotlight in multiple formats. Can you tell me a little bit about why does looking at the top of your library at each upkeep really matter?
So that's not really so much the part that matters. The part that matters is the fact that you're able to ramp your mana on a key turn of the game, and the fact that it acts as a win condition. And as a 2-mana card that acts as a win condition eventually, in matchups like this is where it's at its absolute best, because Noah here was able to play that Search for Azcanta on turn 2 underneath any of Christopher's counter magic, and now he essentially has this win condition on the board that Christopher is going to need to use a card like Commit to Memory or something like that in order to get it off the table before it flips, because if that thing flips, Christopher is going to have a really, really hard time beating just the avalanche of card advantage that Noah's just going to be pushing down the mountain on him.
Yeah, we saw the cast down take down the Glintstream Siphoner, and not a whole lot of action since then. Really, these players just kind of making their land drop. We see Noah taking a look at the top with that Search for Azcanta and passing the turn back. Is that what you expected in this?
Yeah. I don't think either player, unless they have to, is going to try to go for a big spell except on their opponent's end step.
Okay, so they're really just trying to build something. You know, they're trying to assemble the perfect hand, but they're also trying to do it before their opponent does.
Yeah, so a lot of it is just that you know that your first big spell is going to run into a counterspell, and if you want to fight a counter war over that, your opponent is going to have access to more mana because you spent 5 or 6 mana for your big spell, and after you fight that war, you either win or lose it, but then you pass the turn back to your opponent, and they're going to be able to easily resolve their big spell and leave open counter magic.
So it becomes this sort of battle as far as when do you actually go for it? How do you balance the idea that you could potentially win that war and maybe even also defend against their big threat?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
So we do see that Search for Azcanta transforming. It is now Azcanta the Sunken Ruins, and that is part of that card advantage engine. This is going to be able to help Noah anytime that he's got an extra 4 mana lying around, just go up a card in hand.
Yeah, and in a matchup like this, where you're able to use that as just an activated ability on your opponent's end step, it's really hard for Christopher to win. Christopher needs to start just playing out his cards in hopes of, you know, maybe killing Noah before Noah is able to answer his threats. But
Ravenous Chupacabra going to go hungry this time. It's a 2/2 for 4 with apparently no other abilities in this matchup.
yeah, and that's what I mean by him needing to play out his cards. He just needs to apply pressure in any way he sees how.
There's Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. We're going to see that one. Plus up, draw a card, and then, of course, a fantastic ability at this end step. Untap 2 tapped lands you control. You can tap out for this one, and then all of a sudden, you've got mana for your opponent's turn in this matchup.
Yeah, and you know, the thing is, Christopher tapped down his mana. He tapped out for that Ravenous Chupacabra, and immediately Noah pounced on the opportunity to get that Teferi out of the battlefield, knowing that it would resolve. Didn't even worry about getting the threat off the other side of the table, just immediately plus the Teferi so he could leave open counter magic of his own. And now he's just going to keep on plussing this Teferi. If he wants to deal with that Ravenous Chupacabra, he's going to just do it with a fatal push after activating a Field of Ruin or something like that.
Sure, and that Chupacabra able to attack into the Teferi, but now we have got Teferi that is going to be drawing a card each turn. We have got a Azcanta the Sunken Rune, which is activating, and I think we're about to see one of my favorite ways to use this card, which is a main phase activation of the Azcanta, and the reason is that now that Noah is passing the turn, untap 2 lands, that Azcanta is a land, and now he gets to do that twice. We're looking at maybe 3 extra cards per turn.
Yeah, and when that's happening, you're getting 10 looks every single turn. You get your draw step, you get the draw of the Teferi, you look at the top 4, you look at the top 4. You're going 10 cards deep a turn. It is not reasonable.
Christopher tries to answer this Teferi with a Vraska's Contempt. Noah has got the disallow for it. The Chupacabra is going to swing in, and blink of an eye, not kicked, is going to get that one off the battlefield. Can't resolve it this turn.
And normally, you don't see blink of an eye target Ravenous Chupacabra very often.
Usually when it comes back down, it's just as good. So, plus and up the Teferi. We might be activating this Azcanta again, and this has just got to be so discouraging for Christopher Meyer.
Yeah, at this stage of the game, it feels like things have already ended. And here, this is a control mirror. We expected these games to go very, very long.
Yeah, and now, I think possibly the most intimidating part about this is that every time that Noah has to reveal what it is, it's almost just saying, yeah, I've got this one. I've got the Essence Scatter. Try for it.
Yeah, I think he's already revealed multiple counterspells.
Yep, so we know that those are in hand. We're activating the Azcanta, the Sunken Rune. We're taking another look. We're getting a Fatal Push, putting some cards on the bottom of the battlefield. Noah's not going to be hurting for cards anytime soon. Now it's just a matter of how do you win? You called that Azcanta a win condition. Even Teferi is a win condition. Now it's just a matter of waiting until you can actually do it. Glimmer of Genius coming down.
That's precisely true. So, I mean, at this point, it's just kind of about going through the motions. And crazier things have happened than Christopher winning this game right here. But not that many.
Yeah, it's quite an uphill battle that we're looking at. We're deploying Search for Azcanta. Now, this actually works out because while the other one is transformed, it has a different name. And so while it is the same card, as long as the other one doesn't transform, both of them can exist on the battlefield, and it's just going to be, now instead of 10 looks every turn, 11 looks.
Yeah. If no so desires, he can just drop his top card into his graveyard.
I mean, in 6 turns, you're looking at your entire library. That's pretty good. So it's a 2-2 on the battlefield up against a 6 loyalty Teferi, a Search for Azcanta, and Azcanta the Sunken Rune, a Field of Ruin, a Glimmer of Genius at the end step. And at this point, Noah's got to be feeling pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, at this stage of the game, it's kind of like Noah can do whatever he wants to do and just feel it out.
And the unfortunate thing is that, Christopher's, not been able to hit a whole lot of land drops, but also has been sort of forced to keep trying to put anything on the battlefield. We haven't even seen a whole lot of turns in which Christopher isn't tapping out all this mana, and it's because, what are you going to do? Pass the turn with your mana open against this?
Yeah, and I mean, all of this has snowballed from a turn 2 Search for Azcanta from Noah Walker. And that's the most important thing to recognize there, is that whole series of events played out because Noah played a card that cost 2 mana on his second turn when Christopher only had 1 mana available, which is crazy to think that all of that happened because of that one initial action.
And you called it a win condition at the time, and you hear that, you look at it, it's an enchantment. What do you mean by that? I think it just very clearly demonstrated what was happening. So a duress comes down, it takes a Glimmer of Genius, and it sees the Scarab God and 5 lands to accompany it.
Yeah, we talked about how important land drops are in these control mirrors. Noah agrees. I've played control decks over the years where in mirrors I would keep a 7-lander.
Really?
And Noah wasn't quite there, but Noah's only cards were a 4-mana draw spell and the Scarab God, and he snap kept that hand in this matchup. So that just goes to show how important it is to be hitting land drops.
Yeah, I mean, when the game's not going to be ending early by any means whatsoever, really keeping these hands with the intention of how is this hand going to look on turn 5? How is this hand going to look on turn 6? How is this going to line up once the game is actually happening as far as how this matchup plays out? So it's 3 mana, and it's a Doomfall to follow up that Duress. And we decide we don't want to deal with it. Syncopate is just going to exile that spell, put it away.
Yeah, Christopher kind of wants to keep his secrets to himself for now. He wants to make sure he holds on to, whatever key cards he might have.
Yeah.
In this spot.
And Doomfall able to do such a powerful job of eliminating some of those big threats. Torrential Gearhulk, potentially. You've got the Scarab God on the other side of the battlefield. Very resilient threats once they actually hit the battlefield.
Yeah, and when Noah taps out for a card like Doomfall, Christopher's going to use a counterspell on it if he has one, basically 100% of the time, because if he doesn't use that counterspell, then if Noah wants to, he could just take the counterspell out of his hand anyway. And if he doesn't want to, well, then he gets to take the better card.
Great point. So it's Glintstave Siphoner down for Noah, only leaving 1 mana available at the turn, and it is going to be Liliana Death's Majesty to follow it up. Talked about it in Game 1, we're seeing it in Game 2. When one player taps out for a turn, the other player will capitalize on it. Yeah,
and here, Noah, perhaps just realizing that, Christopher knows his hand is just a Scarab God and a pile of land, knows that he has to cast this Glintstave Siphoner. Glintstave Siphoner, an excellent card in this matchup, especially post-board out of Noah's deck, where Christopher will have sideboarded out his most efficient removal spells for it.
Sure, and it is still going to be a pretty effective attacker because it does have that menace ability. So we're going to attack on in, moving towards the Liliana. Actually, this is going to give us the energy to draw an additional card next turn. Take that Liliana down a little bit and follow it up with the Scarab God. We saw Christopher tap out. Now it's Noah's turn.
Yeah, and Christopher could have a good answer, something like Vraska's Contempt here. But if he does not, Noah really knows how he can apply the screws here. He understands that resolving this Scarab God is an important thing to do in this matchup. And, he's going to force Christopher to tap mana on Christopher's turn again by casting the Scarab God here. Or he could just happenstance win.
The interesting thing, too, is that really the options for the Scarab God to capitalize on its activated ability are relatively limited right now. Not a whole lot of creature cards in the graveyard. There hasn't been a whole lot of fights on that territory. But it's still a massive 5/5 attacker. It's still going to be providing this kind of omnipresent pressure on the battlefield. And unless you're willing to exile it with something like a Vraska's Contempt, it's going to keep coming back. So 2 zombies on the battlefield from Liliana.
And both those effective blockers on that Scarab God, which otherwise would be able to take out the Liliana on the other side of the table. Another important thing to note here is that Christopher, when he's plussing this Liliana, could accidentally give Noah target for that Scarab God.
Because you do have to put the top 2 cards into the graveyard, and then you create your zombie. But if you create one there, an option, maybe a Torrential Gearhulk, anything like that, that could be a huge win for Noah.
It's a dangerous situation for Christopher in that regard.
And we see Noah holding up mana possibly to try and capitalize on that, but also with a couple of disallows in hand. A lot of options on that side. On Christopher's side, the Liliana is still a pretty fine bit of pressure on the battlefield. It looks good. The Scarab God is attacking in pretty happily, though. So it's going to be an Ether Hub from Christopher, just adding a bit of energy. We see 1 energy on Noah's side, 1 energy on Christopher's side. So we'll be curious to see what happens with this Liliana as the game goes, if it starts to almost become a detriment. But we do see Never getting cast on the Scarab God. Now that is an interesting choice, but it is going to get off the battlefield.
Yeah, and important to note the combination of Never and Return together does actually deal with the Scarab God while also netting you a 2/2. But we know that Noah has counter magic right now. And
that's sort of the tricky part. At this point, I'm almost a little bit curious to see what will happen, because Noah does have the option of trying to counter this half of it. Might also just try and save it for any other follow-up spell for the future, but it looks like that is what we're going with. Now that we're going to tap out for this, now we go for the disallow, force Christopher to tap out entirely for this exchange. Also get rid of that option to have that exile spell in his graveyard moving forward, whereas if he had countered just the Never, that would have remained in his graveyard for any potential future exchanges.
Yeah, so Noah, again, navigating this very well.
It's going to be another plus on the Liliana. 2 cards go into the graveyard. We see a Glintsleeve Siphoner and a Doomfall. That does mean that there is now a creature in the graveyard for that Scarab God to potentially start bringing back.
Yeah, and Christopher is tapped out here once again, so Noah does find himself with an opening wherein he will be able to resolve that Scarab God if he wants to.
Firing down that Field of Ruin as well at this moment, taking down the Ether Hub and just going for his own island. Is there anything particularly critical about that Ether Hub, or is this the sort of play that, you've got the mana up, you might as well get out of the way?
I think you're kind of just, going for it. He saw a Canyon Slough in Game 1. So here he is in Game 2, and the only source of red mana on the other side of the battlefield is an Ether Hub. So he assumes that there's going to be at least one red card in Christopher's deck here, and by removing that red mana from the other side of the table, he won't have to worry about that.
I'd be pretty happy to see Nicol Bolas come down to the battlefield.
As would I.
I've had a pretty good relationship with that card. As of yet, I got to go up to Victoria, Canada, got to open up that card on the pre-release, and that was where I started my journey with Nicol Bolas. It's been a good one since. Seeing it here on some coverage would also make my day.
It's a pretty exciting card.
It is. Torrential Gearhulk coming on down. It's going to be a Vraska's Content, pointing it towards the Scarab God, and this time it is going to resolve. So now the Scarab God, the 5/5 on the battlefield, has been replaced by a 5/6 on the other side, and it's currently flanked by 2 zombies. Things are turning around a little bit on Christopher's side.
Absolutely. I think Noah there, was really hoping to dodge top deck, and instead Christopher found, the perfect card for the situation. Christopher, he's been in this game the whole time. He's been doing a lot with this Liliana. He may even want to tick this Liliana down to return his Glintsleeve Siphoner right now. A lot of options going on.
And I think we do see that consideration happening here. We have decided to plus it up, maybe just continue developing the board with just about anything, and keep that loyalty high. So it's going to be another zombie coming down to the battlefield. We do lose a Gonti, Lord of Luxury. I wonder if that one's going to be coming back. That strikes me as a card that could have a lot of applications in this kind of matchup.
Absolutely. So I imagine on Christopher's following turn, if he still has that Liliana, still has much loyalty, he is going to be minusing and returning that Gonti back to the battlefield. The Gonti in a matchup like this will sometimes have a hard piece of counter magic underneath it. The fact that you can put that Gonti onto the battlefield without spending any mana because of the Liliana activation is just very, very powerful.
I think I see a Vraska's Content in Noah's hand. That's going to be the case. He's got a Disallow to back it up. So the last card is a Negate. A Disallow is going to beat it. We are not going to get to see that exchange. But all things considered, Christopher's still in a pretty fine spot. He lost his Liliana on that exchange, but now he's the player with the Torrential Gearhulk and 3 zombies up against a Glintsleeve Siphoner.
Yeah, I mean, he's out of gas, but it looks like Noah's pretty much out of gas too. So at this stage of the game, it looks like Christopher is going to be able to clean up pretty quickly. He's attacking for 11 at a time after all.
And what a distinct difference between turn 2 Search for Azcanta and not turn 2 Search for Azcanta as far as the ability to maintain that level of card advantage. Noah's down to 1 card in hand, Christopher as well on only that 1 card in hand. Just doesn't have the same capacity to refill.
Yeah, and now Noah has found his search, but maybe it's not too late.
Cast down and Search for Azcanta, a pretty good 2 cards to have. Eliminates the Torrential Gearhulk. Now it's just these 2 zombies. They do present a 3-turn clock, but this is against a card that is really going to start digging through the top of the library. So we find ourselves at 6. Christopher still at 20, though a life total like that might be somewhat deceptive as far as convincing someone that he's really going to be the winner.
Yeah, in a matchup like this, your life total is not so much the indicator of who is winning. It oftentimes has more to do with who has more permanence on the battlefield. Of course, when life totals start to get really low, like is happening here.
And that's a Field of Ruin. We just saw the Azcanta transform into its land version, and Christopher then puts down a Field of Ruin. We're only going to get one activation from this land that very well could have been the saving grace of this of this game.
Yeah, and Field of Ruin, the original reason why it was being included in decks was because of how important it was at dealing with Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. And here again, we see it being used for its key application. Noah only getting one activation out of that Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. That's a huge difference from him being able to do that turn in and turn out.
And a land which is so hard to interact with for this deck. It's running Negates, it's running Essence Scatter. Really the only card that has got a shot against it is that Disallow, but did not have one available at the time, and that is a huge draw for Christopher Meyer, who was able to come ahead with that. And we see Jace's defeat take down the Negate to allow the Glimmer of Genius, and the players are about back to where they were. One card for Christopher, and Noah's going to be able to refill with a couple of cards off of that Glimmer. Yeah,
so now Noah a bit ahead on cards, but he's at 2. There are 2 power creatures on the other side of the battlefield. His deck really is just a pile of spot removal. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not Noah can find a way to get back into this.
Ooh, Torrential Gearhulk, the 5/6, get back an instant. Could be cast down, could be Vraska's Contempt. Take down one, the Gearhulk answers the other. What a draw, because the last card in hand is a land, and I only saw the 2 lands. I didn't see what that final card was. What a good one to have.
Yeah, some top decks going back and forth. Each player finding the card they need on particular turns
and
over and over.
Champion of Wits coming down. We're going to try and draw ourselves to an answer. Noah was also able to go back up to 4, notably, which means that even with a good piece of removal that could get drawn here, this doesn't definitely mean game over. But it is Doomfall here. Probably going to be exiling a creature on that battlefield. And we're going to cycle, see what we can come up with. So it's an attack for 2. Noah finds himself at 2. It's 1 draw step plus whatever he drew off of the Fetid Pools. I think one of those was actually... Ooh. All right, was not quite enough. Could answer one of those creatures, could not answer the other. That means that we're going to have a Game 3 coming up. Champion of Wits alongside Liliana and the Zombie Army, making it happen.
And these are all cards that excel in this control mirror. 2 players who have really kind of built their decks for this control matchup. Now we get to see what it's like when they play against each other.
So the Duress, it takes a look at a Disallow. It takes a look at 2 Glimmer of Genius as well as a Glintsleeve Siphoner, and really only 2 lands in this hand.
Yeah, that's not particularly great, but the fact that he has this Glintsleeve Siphoner on turn 2, that card really overperforms in these post-boarded games because Christopher, he's hard up to keep inexpensive spot removal in his deck. So that Siphoner can potentially net Noah quite a few cards, and if Noah is able to hit that 3rd and 4th land drop, he can really fight his way into this game and then find additional lands with things like Glimmer of Genius.
But if we start to see those land drops get missed, it could be a very dangerous territory that Noah is walking into. It's going to be a Glintsleeve Siphoner on Christopher's side of the battlefield as well. An attack on in. That's going to get us our 2nd energy. Now it's time to find out, did that draw step give us the land? It did. And a search for Azcanta as well. For Noah, that has got to be a huge sigh of relief. Not only hitting the 3rd land drop, but now having access to another land drop eventually and a way to ensure that he hits them. Glintsleeve Siphoner in for Christopher, taking Noah down to 18. Hopefully we'll have a return play on a similar level. It's going to be Champion of Wits. Taking a look at the 2 cards off the top, then you discard 2 cards. Now, when you do eternalize this, the way that it's written is actually that you draw cards equal to its power. So really, this is kind of a late-game powerhouse. Eventually, you can pay the, I think, 6 mana.
And you get a 4/4 that draws you 4 cards, and you only have to discard 2.
You can phenomenally refill your hand. It's almost like even if you're at empty-handed at that point, you make your land drop to hit that one, you're still left with the 2 best cards from the top 4 as opposed to this one, which really you end up staying at about the same card count.
So really just great in these control matchups.
And it looks like we're going to actually draw the additional card before we see the search for Azcanta trigger. A little bit of an interesting direction. I might have gone the other way myself.
Yeah, I mean, when given the option, it's sometimes interesting to see how people sequence that. I suppose Noah could have looked at the top card and seen if he wanted to intentionally bin it first, which would have given him more information. So he is, however, in Game 3 of a control mirror, so there's a lot to be said for just playing quickly.
Yeah, raw card advantage, playing quickly, getting the cards on the battlefield, and trying to end this game before you end up in turns. Absolutely an option. So, Champion of Wits out. We also do have Glint Sleeve Siphoners on both sides. Search for Azcanta. The land drops doing okay right now. Noah does have the 4th land drop. Christopher so far doing pretty okay. Land drops was a big thing that you were talking about when we get into these control mirrors. So, hopefully we're going to see Christopher continue to hit his. We have so far. It's a Field of Ruin as well, which is a great answer to that Search for Azcanta eventually. And we see Gonti, Lord of Luxury, coming down. We talked last game about if it was going to come down. Getting a card from Noah's deck, any card, just seems like such a big play, because not only are you developing something on the board, but now you get to functionally go up a card in hand that is significantly harder to interact with.
Yeah, so a lot of the time you have a Gonti that has a counterspell underneath it or something like that, and it's a card that you can't get rid of via something like Duress or Doomfall. So just as you said, it's well protected and provides you with an answer that your opponent can't really deal with until you play it on your choice of threat.
And it's worth noting, just as this game develops, as a removal spell could come down, remove that Gonti, how is that going to interact with the card that has now been exiled face down?
So that card will still be exiled face down, and Christopher can still play that card whenever he wants to.
So this isn't like a lot of these spells where you see, maybe like a Hostage Taker where you can cast it as long as you control Hostage Taker. This is one that once this comes down, you get that card.
Absolutely.
So it's the Scarab God coming down for Noah. He's going to be another player tapping down. These players, really, we were expecting a bit more of this draw go, but it's been pretty consistent around turn 4. One player will make the turn 4 play. It'll be immediately followed by the 5-drop. And let's see if it's going to be another 5-drop that follows.
Yeah, so I think in post-boarded games, the players increase their threat density by a lot here. Because in Game 1, both players have way more answers than they do threats. So you don't really want to have your deck look like that, because you just end up with an excess of cards that don't really do anything. And whereas, yeah, now it's different.
So we see that the Scarab God exiled by a Vraska's Contempt. That was the big 4-mana spell of Christopher main phasing it while the shields were down, so to speak, on Noah's side of the battlefield. A small attack in. It's 17 to 12. 3 energy on Christopher's side, which means that he'll have the opportunity to start digging into some card advantage. And Noah sitting on the possibility of a Teferi here. Yeah,
and Noah, also interestingly there, he chooses not to, bin his card and try to flip the Search for Azcanta, perhaps wanting to wait until he is able to use a Field of Ruin of his own to deal with Chris Meyer's Field of Ruin. That way he, is able to protect his Azcanta the Sunken Ruin.
Yeah, that'll definitely be an interesting thing to happen as Noah's graveyard fills up a little bit more. His decision as to whether or not he actually wants to really transform this one yet, or wait until he's got some sort of way to interact with this, because really he would just be walking directly into the answer that Christopher has on board. Christopher doesn't have an answer to Search for Azcanta, but he's got one for Azcanta.
Absolutely.
And there's the Canyon Slough coming down. We've been missing it. It didn't really make an appearance in Game 2.
I want to see Nicol Bolas.
I want to see Nicol Bolas real bad.
Yeah.
So, there is a Teferi out and about. And otherwise, it looks like it's going to take a little bit of a hit. We've got the Search for Azcanta and the Teferi. Not going to be able to minus that one anytime soon. And we've got the 5-mana play. It's the Scarab God from Christopher Meyer, and it's going to be Jace's defeat. A 2-mana answer to a big 5-mana card. Noah gets to untap. Search for Azcanta still very much in the realm. And it looks like we are going to transform this. Christopher's tapped out. It's not going to be activating just yet, because you do have that Teferi as well. You can ensure maybe two of those activations.
Yeah, and something interesting to note here now is that Noah also has an additional copy of Search for Azcanta in the hand, so he can kind of have one at the ready if Christopher does want to use mana and a turn to use Field of Ruin to try to deal with that.
Otherwise, we do see that Gonti. There is still the mystery card into that. I'm a little bit curious about what that could be. You know, I think pretty conventionally you would end up going for maybe a counterspell or some kind of win condition.
Yeah, so it could be anything underneath that Gonti. He could have like whiffed kind of hard and hit, you know, some expensive spell that he just hasn't had an opportunity to cast. We really have no idea. At the end of the turn, at the end of the game, he does have to reveal that card.
Ooh, mysterious. That's going to be the big reveal.
I actually don't know if that's true. Does he have to reveal it? I would like him to.
You would like him to?
It's not the same as a morph.
It's a courtesy thing.
Yeah.
All right, so we do have the Glacial Fortress. We do have our own Field of Ruin available now. And it looks like we are going to be untapping these options. The Field of Ruin did not get activated in the face of an opposing one, actually. So maybe just the decision at this point is to get what value he can from it.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, because Noah has the backup Search for Azcanta, he doesn't really need to worry about protecting his Azcanta the Sunken Ruin in the same way.
Let him spend the mana.
Yeah, and Christopher Meyer also, now that he knows about the second Search for Azcanta, isn't really going to use that crucial mana to try to deal with a card like that.
And we see Disallow as well as Glimmer of Genius off of this duress. Noah electing not to actually cast one of these spells in response to it. You know, you talked earlier about using the counterspell in the face of this removal spell because it either takes that or the better card. But Noah looking to keep this mana up either for this Azcanta or for this Glimmer of Genius.
Yeah, and I like this from Noah a lot because while it could be tempting to disallow there, by showing Christopher that hand, he's essentially saying to Christopher, here, you have to take my disallow instead of me casting it, and then he still has 4 open mana, which he can then use to, you know, glimmer and or, you know, activate his Azcanta the Sunken Ruin.
And there is Liliana, Death's Majesty. We saw it have a pretty good impact on the board last time. It's going to be coming back down and starting to develop this board again. Noah Walker with no creatures on board. Nothing as far as really trying to apply pressure other than this Azcanta.
And things are not looking good for Noah here, despite him, you know, having all of the most important engines of the deck on the battlefield.
So we're going to fire that one down, one on top, one on bottom, draw that one as well as a mystery, and I believe that was a Teferi off of the top. So now Noah does have another one of these Teferi in the wings. He lost his last one, and now he can start really trying to develop himself up to, you know, maybe one of the win conditions of this deck is just to ult the Teferi when you're at this kind of draw go, when you're at this sort of just grindy matchup.
Yeah, and he's under some pressure here, so he's not going to be able to ult Teferi anytime soon, but I imagine that he is at the stage of the game where he has enough mana where he's looking to do something like tick down a Teferi, put the Scarab God back on the top of your library. Maybe Vraska's can tempt your Scarab God and play a Teferi and untap 2 lands. That way the Teferi can live through an attack from Gonti and Glintsleeve Siphoner. Just some interesting stuff going down here.
So it's 4 mana, and we do see the Vraska's Contempt pointed towards that Liliana. Only the one activation to be seen from it. This is sort of a free turn because Christopher is fully tapped out. We see a land come down. It's Teferi, and we're actually going to bury this card.
Yeah, and I think that line is just about perfect from Noah. Now Christopher, you know, he's definitely killing this Teferi here, but you know, he's not drawing an extra card off this Glintsleeve Siphoner this turn. He's going to have to use all of his mana to fight back into the game, and Noah really has just tons of card advantage at the ready here.
Sure. Azcanta as well as Search for Azcanta doing a phenomenal job of supplementing Noah's hand. We saw it in Game 1. Now we get to see it in Game 3.
But this game has been tight all the way through. A lot of the time when you watch these more mid-range or control mirrors, there's one player who just runs away with it. We're this deep into this game, and we still have no idea who's going to win.
No. I mean, both players, you know, one player has got the pressure, the other one has got really the mana advantage as well as the card advantage. And I do think I see another Teferi in Noah's hands. So 2 of these have been taken out so far. A third one might be coming down to the battlefield. But it's just going to be A pass back of the turn. This is some patient play.
Yeah, and Noah at this point realizes how many cards he has in hand. He knows that Christopher is about to draw Liliana, and he wants to make sure that he is able to fight a counter war over that Liliana and prevent it from coming down on this turn. So
there's the Vraska's Contempt on this Glintleaf Siphoner, willing to pay the 4 mana, and Noah is going to be going up to 12 in the exchange, though there is still that attacking Gonti on the battlefield that needs to be addressed, or not, I suppose.
Yeah, and Gonti, it's only attacking for 2 a turn. Noah can really kind of afford to take that damage for the time being.
And it looks like just a quick little reversal to do that before attackers are actually declared, preventing that energy acquisition.
Yeah, and that makes sense. He doesn't want Chris to draw another Glintleaf Siphoner and then to be able to draw a card right away.
Exactly. So it's a 5-mana play. It's the Scarab God coming back down. It went away because of the Teferi, but we see it returning back now, and I think Noah's just looking to see maybe there's an answer in the top 4.
Yeah, and it looks like I think that's a cast down, but that can't target either of the creatures on Christopher's side of the table. Maybe he's wishing he activated that Escanta first so that he could have used cast down to deal with the Glintleaf Siphoner.
Cast down, of course, destroy target non-legendary creature. And the Scarab God, legendary. Gonti, legendary. A lot of legends in this deck. So Noah's going to head into his turn. He does have that Azcanta untapped, and it's an enormous amount of mana. Now it's just trying to figure out how to sort of stem the bleeding from these 2 very large threats. That Scarab God, no one knew it was coming down to the battlefield soon. So you have to imagine that he had some sort of game plan. He was willing to fire off that Vraska's Contempt at the Glintleaf Siphoner. So it's going to be a Field of Ruin targeting the opposing Field of Ruin, and Christopher just allows it. Not a whole lot to be done.
And I mean, I don't think Christopher can really do much about that at all anyway.
No. not a whole lot of 2-mana disallows without a Brawl on the battlefield. Even still would have cost blue. So yeah, not a thing. Not a thing. So it's the Scarab God, it's Gonti, and it's Noah Walker trying to come up with a way to win. Because the Field of Ruin got activated, that does mean that we have Revolt. That means that Fatal Push is able to take down the Gonti. That means that Doomfall is able to eliminate the Scarab God, and that's a big deal because of the exile clause of Doomfall. Firing this off in the opposite order or trying to wait in any sort of way would not have gotten that done.
Yeah, so now that's exiled. Noah has successfully basically dealt with everything Christopher has presented thus far. Christopher relying on the top of his library here. If he finds a big threat, Noah probably does not have an answer in hand right now. So
Nicol Bolas?
Nicol Bolas is a big threat.
So we're going to bring back that Champion of Wits. It's going to allow us to draw 4 and then discard 2. Looks like that is going to resolve?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's an activation, so Noah can't really do much about it. Luckily, this is just, as crazy as it seems, this is just him drawing essentially like 2 very good cards as opposed to just drawing 2 cards. And now Noah is going to get to continue to activate that Azcanta the Sunken Ruin here while also getting the trigger off of his search for Azcanta. So Noah, even though he's up against this 4/4, he's at 10, he doesn't have anything on the battlefield of his own, Noah's still probably feeling quite good about his chances in this game.
What a strange position to be in, to watch your opponent draw 4 cards, discard 2, and think, okay, my turn.
Yeah, oh, this is fine for me.
All right. So we do see Commit to Memory off of that. We also do see Teferi, that Commit to Memory. One of the bigger cards also just keeps the deck from actually losing to running out of cards. That back end of Memory allowing both players to shuffle in their graveyard, their hand, draw a fresh 7.
Comes up surprisingly often. A lot of the time when you're playing a blue-white mirror, it seems like the game doesn't even start until both players reshuffle.
We got to see that, last weekend in Pittsburgh. We saw one of those mirror matches between 2 of these very low win condition sort of Teferi control decks. Both of the Commit to Memories ended up getting cast out of the graveyard, and then the game actually really ended. So Teferi out and about. We're going to untap a couple of lands. Azcanta still available. And it's just a lone 4/4 on the other side of the battlefield, though Christopher really starting to hit some of these land drops. We saw him miss for a few turns early on, and now we see this massive mana advantage from Noah.
Yeah, and that's one of the major issues here, too, is that I know Christopher has access to 9 lands on the battlefield, but he didn't have them for the entirety of the game, and Noah was really just working with more resources, while both players had plenty of cards to cast.
Yep, we see a Vraska's Contempt point towards that. A Disallow is just a clean answer. There's 5 mana remaining now. We're going to swing for 4, and that's just a clean hit. Teferi goes down to 1. But Noah stays up at 10.
Yeah, Noah's not worried at all about the Teferi being on 1 or 5.
Back of Vraska's Contempt comes down, and that is going to hit it. This is in response to Noah activating that Oskanta to take a look at the top 4. Christopher capitalizes on that moment of low defense to really make sure that that gets off the battlefield.
Yeah, now Noah, with this Disallow in hand, it means that he has multiple pieces of hard counter magic and a commit to memory in hand. And I think that alongside the active as Cant of the Sunken Ruin should put Noah in a position where it's very, very difficult for him to lose this game.
Yeah.
So Christopher, very well fought battle, struggling on his mana for a decent portion of this game, just not going to be able to get it done. Noah Walker piloting his way through one of the more interesting games we've watched all day.
Yeah, these control mirrors are, you know, the back and forth and watching how these cards are manipulated, watching these players really try and thread this needle between when you need to tap out, how is that going to affect what they tap out for, how can you answer that while defending your own. Seeing this back and forth of resources is just such a fascinating dance between these two players where you can't give any quarter or you end up just getting really decimated early on.
Yeah, and now Noah with an additional hard counter in hand. These players both, as you said, they're picking their spots, trying to find out when's the best time to try to win this game. And
Christopher just kind of testing it a little bit, poking with this Doomfall. Is this going to resolve? Is this going to let me get some information? It's not.
Yeah.
No.
It's just not.
Disallow. Let's go for it. Let's not. It's Torrential Gearhulk, and I think this was for the flashback of it, and I think we just did Torrential Gearhulk Disallow to counter the activated ability of Eternalizing.
That's exactly right. So Disallow, it's more than just a hard counter spell, and we've seen that time and time again over the course of these first 5 rounds. We just watched it counter that Eternalize ability. Earlier today, we watched it counter a Beaumont Courier activation. Just a really versatile card that has proven its worth time and time again in the standard format. And
at this stage in the game, this Torrential Gearhulk, it's got 5 power. This is one of the first times that Noah's really had a creature that can turn sideways all match. And now suddenly, there's an opposing Torrential Gearhulk, so maybe the attacks are a little bit less frequent if this one ends up hitting the battlefield. It's commit to memory, but now both players really trying to get something on the battlefield that can win. Time has got to be a factor for these players at this point.
Yeah, I think it has to be at the stage of the game where they're in turns, I imagine, or getting close at least. I mean, we have been watching this match go on and on for some time at this point.
The interesting thing here, by the way, that commit to memory puts the Torrential Gearhulk into Noah's library.
Well, Noah still has plenty of opportunities to find more counter magic here. Notice he is so comfortable with his position that he actually just binned a Syncopate there. Yeah, the Syncopate is going to be able to counter Torrential Gearhulk, but it's going to cost 7 mana to do so. And I think Noah would much rather find a cleaner answer.
Yeah, and with another Torrential Gearhulk on the top of the library, now that Noah put his own Torrential Gearhulk off that commit because Christopher had control of it from that Gonti.
Oh, okay. That makes more sense, yes.
Yep. So he ends up casting that commit to it and then has to lift up his own library to put it there. It's finally revealed.
Yeah, the Gonti card all along.
It's going to be a Glint Sleeve Siphoner as well. We've got 4 energy available at the moment, so actually we're looking at potentially 3 draws in a row, back to back to back, with only the 1 energy gained each turn. Next turn can go down to 2, go back up to 3 with the attack. Noah's really starting to move ahead with this game plan.
Yeah, at this point of the game, Noah's been in the driver's seat for some time now. I think that, considering how much he's slowed down here, it means they're probably in turns.
Very possibly, yeah. At this,
I imagine that purple dice there may be turn 1 of extra turns.
I think that one was from the Teferi at one point, and then it just never got moved off of the table.
Okay.
But it could very well not be too long until it starts representing that turns.
Yeah. Okay. So Noah ensuring that he's not going to get decked this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the backside of that commit to memory. Memory, 6 mana. Each player shuffles their hand in their graveyard into the library, then draws 7 cards. It does mean that you have to be the one spending the mana, and you're very likely passing the turn with sort of your shields down. This did take 7 mana. Noah's only going to have 3 available. If there's any card that Christopher can really capitalize, this is the first time in which he's not going to be at that very distinct disadvantage as far as mana goes.
Yeah, and Christopher with 7 new cards and an 8th card with his draw step is very likely to have a big threat with counter magic to back it up. And if he's able to have that, then he'll be able to resolve that card. And if it's Nicole Bolas, this could be really exciting.
Oh, I can't. You're getting me all excited for this. I want to see
excited. Are you excited?
I'm thrilled at just even the potential of it. Even the potential has got me excited. It's going to be Never to Return on this Torrential Gearhulk that does offer a little bit of ability to exile it from the graveyard, though really the graveyard's just got shuffled in. Not a whole lot of targets at the moment.
Yeah, and Noah's going to go ahead and counter that.
All right, we're tapped out then. Well, I guess 1 mana left, but not a whole lot to be done with that. Oh, dang it. All right, Vraska's Contempt. It's not quite a Nicol Bolas, but it's still pretty cool. We're going to go up to 12 to Noah's 10. We've got a 1 mana play. It's a duress to take a look at it. We see Glimmer of Genius and Disallow, and quite a few lands, actually.
Yeah.
For drawing a fresh 7, it looks like Noah was keeping almost the kind of hand that you would keep at the start of the game.
Yeah. There aren't even that many lands left in the decks at this point, right?
At least that many. And this is going to be a pass of the turn. Turn 2 looks like that's being shown now. So we see that 6-sided die come down to the battlefield. It's in the middle there. I think that is going to be representing the turns of this matchup as they are really kind of approaching the end. 9 to 9. One of them needs to kind of find a way to the finish line.
Yeah, now Noah looks like he did draw a Teferi for his draw step. He also has a piece of counter magic in hand.
Mm-hmm. So Christopher at 7 after that hit from the Glint Sleeve Siphoner. We're going to see another Teferi come down to the battlefield just to keep the hand full, to keep any of that up going on. Negate, Disallow. And that is going to be the end of that battle. Teferi does come down. We're going to draw another card. We're going to be able to untap some lands. Could activate the Azcanta before passing the turn, but that does mean that you're only left with 2 mana at the end of it.
Yeah, I think he really just needs to decide. It depends on whether or not he has more action in hand. If he does, he probably doesn't want to tap the Azcanta during his turn. If he does not, he may want to tap the Azcanta during his turn.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of whether or not he even has action to play.
And without being able to activate it on the end step of Christopher, even if he does so, maybe just better to save it and hold up 6 mana. And even if you do need that 2 mana interaction, you can activate it, then try and go for it at that time.
Yeah, because now he can activate the search for Azcanta and search aggressively for some type of counter magic that could interact with a powerful spell that Christopher might play here.
Yep. It's going to be a Torrential Gearhulk. And I wonder if that's actually the game plan. And of course, we actually do have to come on up. It is time to move into the other matches, the further rounds. But the end of that one, actually, what appeared, it went to Game 5, and we saw Christopher actually offer the concession, give the win to his opponent, trying to avoid that unintentional draw here in round 5. And Noah Walker, being in such a dominant position, was of the opinion that it was going to be going in his favor anyway.
Yeah, and, you know, Christopher, his opponent, recognized, okay, Azcanta, Teferi, I'll concede.
But of course, we've got more Magic coming up after this. We'll see you there.